Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with Mystic Genmara, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight is the series I do called Occult and Crochet. And I'm not kidding, I will eventually get a better setup, but for now this is where we're at. And we're going to be discussing Lao Tzu tonight and the basics, and I mean the extreme basics of the Tao. So, you've probably heard of the Tao in various conversations at some point in a mystical or spiritual group. It's a pretty commonly referenced thing, but how much do you know about the person who started it? Oddly enough, there's not a lot written about him, so this is kind of a conglomeration. We're going to go through a little bit about him and then into the basics of kind of the ideas about the Tao. Not too much there because it's a topic I would like to go deeper into, but I don't want to go too far into it just tying them together. So, there are several Hay House publishing house authors that have written extensively about the Tao. Dr. Wayne Dyer, D-Y-E-R, I always say his name wrong, was one of the primary ones. The Tao is a religious, can be political, philosophical, and personal practice. It kind of is all-encompassing, which is why I find it fascinating personally. We're going to go over some of those practices later, or list some of the concepts behind it. But we're going to start with going over the man who basically, some people say he wrote it, some people say he just put it onto paper or a scroll so that it can be read. But that is Lao Tzu. And I may say his name wrong, I do apologize. I tried to listen to it, and there's about as many spellings and how to say it. So, traditionally, and this is something I'll just address here, and I might address it again later, I don't know. But because this was so long ago, the dates are a little sketchy, and there is actually a group of thought that says that Lao Tzu didn't even exist. I don't agree with that. I think that he did, to a certain extent. The myths and legends around him are extensive, and I mean extensive. Trying to find the one vein of truth through all of it is a nightmare. So we're going to go with the most common story of his life that I could find. So it starts around the 6th century BC in an area of China today known as Henan. Tradition states that he was born by the name Li Er. Tradition also holds that he was born on or around the 15th day of the second month of the Chinese calendar, so around the 8th of March, from what I could cross-reference, and I'm not good with math. So, but that's around that time of our current calendar. This line of tradition also believes that his father was a censor-in-chief for the Zhao dynasty, and his mother was Lady Yeshu. That's kind of this tradition. There's a few other ones where he was born of a virgin birth. There was other ones where no one knows who his family was. He just kind of showed up. The myths are fascinating if you ever dig into it. There's one in particular, I didn't put too much information down about this, but it made me laugh, that he was born a full-grown adult and was one of the Chinese immortals. So he was basically birthed out an old man. Like I said, some of the legends about him are fascinating. In his early adult life, he did serve as the archivist for the Royal Zhao court in Wangchen. Today, that would be... okay, I put phonetics, but I'm not sure if I'll still say this right. Luo Yang? Like I said, I put pronunciation guides in there, but I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese. There's multiple accounts of this man's life. The accounts have him living from 6th century all the way up to the 4th century. So the one we're going with, though, has him being an archivist during that time. While working as the archivist in this court, he had access to a very broad variety of writings because the courts had libraries, so of course he had a little bit more of a access than some other people would have had. One of the important writings that it was said he studied extensively was the Yellow Emperor's writings. There's medical journals the Yellow Emperor wrote, there's philosophical journals, and I believe there's a political one, but don't quote me on that, that may have influenced his philosophy. So he used a lot of previous people's writings to kind of develop what would become the Tao Te Ching and the practice of the Tao. Lao Tzu in tradition is said to have been married and only had one son, and that son's name was Zong, who is celebrated during the Warring States period. This particular legend, again, his life was kind of a mystery, so we're going with a lot of legends in this one, is said that Lao Tzu was separated from his son in childhood, probably because this was when Lao Tzu had started his spiritual wanderings and travelings teaching the Tao. Zong was found to be disrespectful to the dead during one particular battle, and Lao Tzu just happened to have come by, which is part of the Tao, and lightly reprimanded him. It's not said that I could find what exactly he told them, but basically he got after him, but he did it in a really gentle way. Zong was shamed, like he should have been, for what he was doing, and he changed his mind and then allowed and helped bury the vanquished dead and allowed the periods of mourning and funeral rites to actually have been practiced. And this, because of his change of his mind during this time, actually have led to the period of peace that have followed after it. So he was kind of being a little twit and not letting them bury their dead, and Dad came by and was like, let them bury their dead, quit being a brat, basically. So I mean, there's, again, the legends are kind of interesting. From what I found, though, Lao Tzu never opened an official school. He never set up a temple, a monastery, any of that. He lived his philosophy, and that attracted students, and some of those students became extremely loyal disciples, to the point where they guarded his myth for years after he'd passed or whatever happened there. It was during the time in court that Lao Tzu was said to have met Confucius, and Confucius was so impressed after meeting the philosopher one time that he eventually developed his line of Chinese philosophy. Again, when you look at the time frames, did he, didn't he? Your guess is as good as mine. I wasn't there, so it was said that Lao Tzu became disillusioned with the corruption and degradation of the morals of the city. I understand that. And decided to venture to the West. At the age of 80, think about that. Most of us are, watching a lot of these type of shows on YouTube or Odyssey or wherever between the ages of like 15 and 50. Now add a couple of more decades to that and be like, I'm going to go ahead and take off and go for a walk and live a hermit's life. At 80, okay. He took his leave of his family and his house and left to become a hermit because he believed that living in closer harmony with nature was done easier alone, I understand that, than with the crowd, and the cities were not the places to live in harmony with nature. The story goes that at the west gate of the country, and this could be the gate going into Tibet, it could be another gate, it's not referenced exactly which gate he was going to, a guard recognized the old philosopher and would not let him pass. Not really sure why he would do this, but okay. Until he wrote down all of the philosophy for this guard to study and learn to practice. Lao Tzu complied, and over a 3-year period as the commonly accepted tradition, he wrote the Tao Te Ching for the guard. During this time, he instructed the guard verbally to basically teach him the way, and this guard eventually was so touched by the philosophy of Lao Tzu that he left his post and followed him into the West as his disciple. side note, just because when I was reading through this and it kept referencing the Western Gate, the Western Gate, the Western Gate, in the more Western philosophy, we'll go with that, versus the East, which is this. The Western Gate was the gateway to the underworld, to the immortals, and to the gods. So, and I have not done enough digging into Eastern philosophy to find out what the West would mean, but it's interesting because he went to the West, and the legend holds that he was, because of his life and the way he lived it, he became one of the Chinese immortals, which would make sense if he went through the gate to the gods of the West. Just something to think about. But it struck me as funny as I was researching this. So, Lao Tzu is considered the father of the religious and philosophical concept of Taoism. It is spelled, because this is a huge one that drives me nuts, it is spelled Taoism, Taoism. But it's said with the hard D sound, so it's almost like a DT, and when you look it up phonetically, that's how it's said. There are people who will call it Taoism. That tells you right there that they actually haven't looked up any research on it. Not that it's a big deal, it's how you were taught, but there are certain terms that you'll see me saying a certain way, but they're not spelled that way. It's because of how this language works when it's translated into English. So, bear with me. In some groups in China, Lao Tzu was seen as a deity. He achieved a status as one of the 3 pure ones and is considered to be immortal, and immortal hermits particularly. Other interesting legends have him traveling to India to teach Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, or, and I thought this one was an interesting side note that as I was going through this path into India, he went into India and became the Buddha. Instead of being Lao Tzu, he was Siddhartha. Like I said, the legends around this man are fascinating, and there's so many of them. Again, some interesting theories. Take what you want, leave the rest. As the Han Dynasty came into power, though, Lao Tzu was beginning to be revered as a religious figure. It was from this belief that the way of the celestial masters became the first Taoist organized group. From here, Taoism moved into the mainstream, and the legends around Lao Tzu grew out of control in some cases. One of the legends states that he became an avatar-like figure and popped up during various times in various guises to continue to guide and correct the path of the Tao practitioners, which is kind of a cool idea, really, because he's the one who founded it, and so he comes back in and is like, no, come on, let's go back over here, this is where we're supposed to be, leave that over there. And it was through his guidance that many were initiated into the discipleship of the Tao. Kind of cool thinking about that. He might still be wandering around out there somewhere and pop in every so often to course correct. Along this line of thinking, Lao Tzu never truly died or actually disappeared into the West. Rather, he continued to travel and teach the Tao, changing his forms even to the current day. Wouldn't that be awesome to be able to meet someone who's been wandering the planet for 3,000 years teaching the Tao? I mean, that's just... I know it may not be true, but it's something that is fascinating. I love that concept. Lao Tzu's philosophy has influenced much in religion and politics and in literature, primarily in China, but his beliefs have spread worldwide. In politics, the concept of restrained statecraft is a part of the Tao. It's leading to a form of pacifism, and it can be that, but when you start to study through the Tao, it actually becomes a form of libertarianism. You take care of you, leave me alone. Other more important domineering political figures and beliefs have tried to weaponize this concept. Basically, they're trying to say that there's power in weakness, power in being subservient, there's power in giving over your everything to someone else. Kind of think of communism, early 1900s Russia. They tried to use some of the teachings of the Tao, but they twisted them. I don't know why you would do that, but that's what they did. And not in so many words, but when you look at the philosophies, there's some heavy influence there. In more modern times, as can be the case, especially lately, some people doubt that Lao Tzu existed. They also doubt that the Tao Te Ching was written by one person, let alone it being Lao Tzu. But discoveries in an excavation in China placed the oldest written copy of the Tao Te Ching around the 4th century BC, leading credence to the fact that he existed. And it would have been possible that one man could have written it. And that's what they're starting to find, is the way it's written in this copy of it looks like it was done by one person, and they are assuming this could have been the oldest current copy. They're trying to, they're still looking, but 4th century, that's significantly older than what they thought. But it puts a lot more belief in that Lao Tzu actually existed. And like I said, until I can find out otherwise, or till I hear otherwise, or if you know otherwise, that's kind of the philosophy that I go with, and that's what a lot of people still believe. So, Lao Tzu's life, not a lot written about him. Biggest popularity, the Tao Te Ching. He also wrote one other book called Hua Hu Ching, and it's this guy here. It's got both the Tao Te Ching and the other one in it. If you are interested, it's linked in the description. There's also just the Tao Te Ching, because it's it's worth reading just from the state of the philosophy behind it, but it's also a good way to just kind of give yourself a little guidance. It's all about balance. So, the Tao, translated basically, is the path, life. The Tao Te Ching means the way and its power. So this is how you harness life. The philosophy is the entirety of life. It's not one part, it's all of it. The beginning, middle, and end of everything is the Tao. The Tao Te Ching is the guidebook for how to live life. It can show how we can live in harmony with nature and her laws, and it's about balance. That's the one thing that the first time I read it through, and I've read it through a few times since, is their focus on balance. Work, rest, away, at home. Light, dark, everything's in balance. I'm sorry, my allergies are kicking my butt right now. I personally love the comments about Taoism, because you look up, what is Tao? And they'll make comments like, the Tao is deep and overwhelming, or it's all-encompassing, it's life. In other words, the Tao is everything, which is not wrong when you dive into it deeper, but it's interesting, and I will actually read the first verse from the first chapter. Let me get into it here. I had this bookmarked, my bookmark fell out. And this kind of sums up everything about the Tao, literally. The Tao, the subtle reality of the universe, cannot be described. That which can be described in words is merely a conception of the mind. Although names and descriptions have been applied, the subtle reality is beyond description. One may use the word nothingness to describe the origins of the universe, and beginningness to describe the mother of the myriad of things. But nothingness and beginningness are concepts. So, right off the bat, you get this idea that you can't really put the Tao in a box. Well, think about your life. In reality, taking away all the nonsense we've all been taught, you pull it all away, throw it away. Can you put your existence into a box and say, this is who I am? No, not easily. Because when you take away what other people think, suddenly you are given a level of freedom that is unbelievable. And it makes life pretty fun. Lao Tzu's belief actually is simple. It's the way the Western mind tries to put everything into a box, into a concept. We have to grasp, physically touch it. We have to understand. Don't put effort into this. Basically, don't put effort forth to force nature. Struggle is futile, and it hinders productivity. This is the philosophy. He had a philosophy called Wu-Wei, W-U-W-E-I. It means do nothing. Now, before people jump up and down and say, see, you don't have to do anything, it's you no. This does not advocate for laziness. Nothing in Lao Tzu's writing says this. It says do nothing against the forces of nature. Allow the flow of life to gush forth into your life in the natural order of things. Lao Tzu said not to struggle against the flow of nature, but to bring spontaneity to your life in the natural order. Keys. Strive for nothing leads to never failing. So if you're not like beating your head into a wall, you can't say you're failing if you put your hand on the wall and walk down to where there's a door. That's the natural order, not trying to plow through the wall. Again, this does not mean laziness. I'm really emphasizing this because I know people who have read the Tao Te Ching and try to understand the Tao, and they're like, well, if I just sit here and don't do anything, that means you're going against your nature, not smart. That violates the law. It means to work within the flow of the natural aspects of life. These are my examples, but that's kind of the way I make it laughable. You wouldn't ask a tiger to give milk, like a cow. It's not in their nature. You wouldn't ask a lamb to hunt a lion. It's not in the nature. You don't work against the natural order. That's the trick with the Tao. And when you understand that forcing something into, round peg, square hole, it doesn't work. And that's what Lao Tzu is pointing out throughout this entire book. And it's not very long. The Tao Te Ching itself is only like 100 pages. Even in this book, it goes from page 7 to 101 in this copy. Oops, sorry. The second book starts on page 111. Again, it's worth reading. I haven't started the second book yet. I have a few books on my nightstand. This one is one of them because it is so fascinating in what he's talking about. The difference from other philosophers around the same time, Confucianism, and I've studied a little bit into Confucianism, but it's so much more structured and strives towards domination and control of all aspects of life. And it has a weird alliance with overbearing government, and it could be just the way I learned it in the first place. That's why I think that, but it's not free flowing. Confucianism is very structured. The Tao is very much about life and understanding how to move through it, not build a concrete wall around it and keep it on this one path. That's more Confucianist type stuff. I will talk about Confucius and his philosophy as well, but we're talking about Tao right now. Meditation and structure are the foundations of really both of these, but structure is less focused in the Tao. Meditation, understanding balance and the flow of time, the flow of nature, is what's focused on. It's not how meditating to learn to control your emotions. It's meditating to understand your emotions. It's not meditating to dominate your body. It's meditating to understand your body. When it needs sleep, when it needs food, when it needs rest, when it needs other things. Because most, not all, most of the religious, philosophical, and otherwise monasteries and monks of China, again, not all, aren't opposed to having marriages. So there's other needs that come up, and Taoism's like, that's normal. It's nature. So there's things like that just to come into awareness of when you're studying this. And I will discuss more about the Tao later because it is a broad subject. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of kind of the basis of what Lao Tzu was speaking of and kind of who he was and then a little bit of what this is. Taoists believe that nature will grant knowledge with simple contemplation and meditation. The keys to understanding the universe will come to us when we let go. A major philosophy in many manifestation practices and a variety of magical practice throughout history is to put your intention, your spell, whatever it is, your prayer out there, and then let it go. In Wicca, in ceremonial magic, in chaos magic, there's a whole list of these different occult groups like that, where you do your ritual, you cast your spell, you light your candle, whatever it is you're doing, and once it's done, you do something else. You don't sit there and stare at that candle while it's burning, unless you're meditating with it. But when you're done, you pinch out the candle and you go watch a movie. You pinch out the candle and go for a hike. You pick up a book. You pick up your craft. What you're like painting or whatever. You taking your mind, your focus, your intention away from it, because you have set your intention into the flow of life and sent it on its way. Now, if you're going to continue to hold on to it and think about it and focus on it and wonder, you're holding it against the flow of time, and you're going to make it not manifest as quickly. Huge aspect of the Tao is learning about controlling this, but it's not controlling to domineer. It's controlling it in the way of, okay, you're putting out this intention, you're putting out this wish, this dream, goal, whatever, and now you're guiding your awareness to follow that. You're not controlling that, you're following it. It's going to show you the next step, the next way of bringing it into manifested reality, but it's not control in the fact of what a lot of people would push it towards. Taoism is back on track here, because I get a little distracted by some of this because it's so fascinating. Taoism believes in the immortality of the soul. A soul manifests into a physicality, learns, expands a conscious and awareness, then returns to the heart of the Tao, the heart of Creator, God Source energy, to expand that consciousness through our personal experiences. Oddly enough, there's a movie in anime years ago, sorry, sidetracking here for a second, called Final Fantasy. The video game was a blast on PlayStation when I was little, but I can't remember what year it was, 2004 maybe, somewhere around there. They made a movie called Final Fantasy, and in it they talk about the heart of Gaia, and it's along the lines of what Taoism is, where we are a spark, an aspect of the heart of the Creator, who have made into physicality to experience life, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, all of it. And when we die and return to the heart, we enrich that life through our experiences. Now, the interesting part about this is it is an all-knowing, all-understanding energy. The Tao, God Source Divine Energy, it understands everything, knows everything, sees everything. But when you're experiencing it as an aspect of manifested physicality like a human, you get a different perspective. Now, does that mean that they don't already know that? No. But it means that when you go back, you can enhance the knowledge a little bit more. It's an interesting philosophy, and from most Western beliefs, it makes you go scratch your head going, well, if it knows everything, then how is this different? Having knowledge is not having wisdom. We'll get back to this in a second. Knowledge is book smarts. Knowledge is, I know things. Cool, you know things. Good for you. Wisdom is experience. Taking knowledge, putting it into action. Knowing something doesn't mean you understand it. Yeah, I know a lot. I'm not lying. I do. I read a lot, and so things like that. But to understand it, you have to practice it. Do I recommend that for everything? Hell no. There's things that I have researched that you travel down a journey and you're like, nope, not doing this. And so you head back out. There's other things that it's like, interesting, I want to try that. So you can speak from a position of knowledge and wisdom, not just from knowledge itself. Knowledge itself, as I've complained about with prophecies. They have knowledge of the words, but they have no wisdom because they don't understand it. That's the same concept. I know people who study the occult from a knowledge perspective. They know nothing. They don't have a clue. When you study it and understand it through experience, wisdom occurs, and then you can speak from a position of wisdom and experience, not just, I read it in a book one time. Cool story. But that's, again, my philosophy, my ideas. Anyway, Taoism is basically the philosophy of energy and balance. Back to our topic here, instead of my ramblings. Qi has to be in balance within the body or illness follows. If you study Qigong or Tai Chi, and I have talked about spirituality and fitness in another video, you can check that out somewhere in the list of videos. But it's really about bringing yourself into a balanced and aligned state. When you do, you're able to kick out illnesses faster. My allergies are really bad right now. I need to really focus on my Qigong. I haven't been. That's what happens. Because your body will literally find ways to heal itself if it's in balance. And you don't get sick as often when you're in balance. So there's something to be said about that. When we are in balance, life flows. Simple. Either we can handle life better in stressful situations. When you're calm and balanced within your own consciousness, you can deal with a lot more stress than what you realize. When you're out of balance, the slightest thing will drive you crazy. When you're exhausted, you've been worn out from work, you come home, and someone left a window open and the sprinkler kicked on. Instant mad. You come home, you're frustrated, you've been dealing with customers or bosses or whatever, and your kid knocks over a glass of juice on the dinner table. If you're not in balance, your anger is going to come first. When you're in balance, you can take a deep breath, clean it up, and move on. That's the trick to really understanding the balance. Life just flows better. Sometimes, when you're in a balanced state and you're going with the flow of existence, your life will improve because you're not fighting for everything. You are setting it out there and you're following it. As it's going down the river, you're following, which means you're taking the next steps, you're doing the next things. Your life is improving. And the results overall are the same. Less stress, more peace. I think we all want that now, right? Taoism, the beauty of Taoism, which is part of the reason I got into studying it in the first place, it can be added to or, studied along with any other religion or spiritual belief. Due to the fact it's a philosophy, it's a way to exist, it's a way to live life. It's better to be in balance, just in general. We live in a duality of existence on this planet for the moment. Who knows what the next planet's going to be like, but where we're at now, we're in a duality. Yin and yang, masculine and feminine, light and dark, hot, cold, etc. It can go on forever. When imbalanced, everything flows better. In one aspect, we're all connected, because we all do go back to source, God, source, divine energy, the Tao, Gaia, however you want to say it. We all go back to that. So through that connection, we are all connected. None of us are a true island. We're all connected through that energy field. We're individual aspects of the divine, or of the Tao. And we return to that energy field at the end of our life cycle. Whether that is when you're 25 and you have a car crash, or when you're 90 and you just go to sleep. You go back to the Tao. It tends to make life a little bit easier to understand and to go with that flow when you can see it from that aspect. Not everybody will, but that does make things a little bit more understandable over the time. Pardon me real quick. Okay, so Taoism is one of the three Chinese philosophies or religions. The other two are Buddhism, which is kind of India-Chinese crossover, and Confucianism. Again, I'm going to talk about those at a later time. I figured we'd start with the easiest slash hardest first because it's the least defined, but that's the magic of the Tao, is it's not defined. It's not lined up in this pattern. There's a base philosophy to it, and from there, you live life. It's easy to practice. It's exceptionally difficult to put into words, because the minute you try to structure it, it changes. I had a friend of mine who studied neuro-linguistic programming. I have a hard time putting it into understanding it because it's a complex way of discussing and working with people. The thing that I always thought was interesting, and she told me this up front, I've studied a few other books about it just because I want to understand it better. The minute you try to put it into focus, you just changed the overall meaning of it. Taoism is along those same lines. The minute you try to put blocks on it, it just slips right through. You cannot put it into a box. It is easiest understood through the Tao Te Ching. Again, referenced, linked below. I read you the first 2 verses of the first chapter. It doesn't tell you how to live your life. It explains what would be best for you in a certain situation. You can also read through some of the modern day philosophers who explain it for the times we are in. Some of the references in the original text are a little bit harder to understand. But for example, Dr. Wayne Dyer, I put one of his books on the Tao in the description of the video. He's got some really good stuff on the Tao. I've watched a few of his videos before he passed. Fascinating. I really wish I could have met him just for this fact of going to one of his meetings or his seminars, because he really understood this. He lived this practice and helped me actually understand a lot more about it. I still am not an expert. I don't claim to be. But it is something that's worth the study. The other one was actually from a friend of mine who she read this on the river, as she was a river rat for a while. And it's called it's not called. We'll start with, it's based off of the Disney characters Piglet and Pooh. Now Disney, it used to be something else. And they use it to explain the Tao. So it's the Tao of Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, and the T of Piglet. There originally were 2 separate books. I found a what do I want to call it? A set together, so it's just one book. It's linked in the description below. It is so fun because it goes through the different characters in the 100 Acre Woods. Tao, Pooh, Piglet, or not Tao, Pooh, Piglet, Eeyore, Tigger, all of them. It kind of describes how the Tao works within each one of them. You don't try to make Tigger do something like crawl. He's a bouncer. Eeyore is just Eeyore. But they love him just because of who he is. And that's kind of the philosophy, is people are going to grow at their own rate. They're going to change how they feel that it's necessary to change. You can't do that for them. So it's helping you to understand you can't go against nature. I mean, you can. It doesn't really work so well most of the time, but you can try. But that's kind of the concept of this video. We won't go too much longer today, but if you're interested in that, you can check out the links below. And like I said, I plan on doing a deeper dive into the Tao later. It'll probably be on a Tuesday one because that's more of my deep dives into philosophies and theories, things like that. But with that, if you have any questions or comments, you can drop them in the comments section below. If you enjoy this type of video, you can hit the subscribe button and follow me here or on Odyssey, on YouTube or on Odyssey. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this particular one. And with that, I will let you guys go. Have a great rest of your evening or morning or day whenever you see this, and I will talk to you later. If I can find the right button. There it is.